Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. I'm Dr. Oluwaseun Iyasiri. I'm one of the coordinators of the group, and this year will be the 6th year of the existence of the group, and we've been having series of webinars and inaugural lectures. So I'm so excited. We're starting on a very good way in the year 2025 with a special guest, Mo Esson. She'll be speaking on the Lagos State Animal Laws 2022 Progressive Legislation or Paper Tiger. Thank you everybody for joining. If today is your first time of joining the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria, I will just let you know that this group was founded in the year 2019 after the gathering of students and researchers at the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Nigeria. And we have three main missions. The first one is to increase awareness in animal behavior and welfare. And secondly is to foster collaboration among stakeholders in animal welfare. And thirdly is to educate the public on the importance of animal welfare. Our aim is to be able to educate people, to reach out, and also to help link ourselves globally. So thank you once more for joining. I want it to be as interactive as possible. Kindly introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and your area of expertise, whether it's related to animal behavior or maybe just let us know who you are. Would love to know you. Thank you so much. Just to introduce our speaker today, I need to take her bio. Moturayo Esson is an animal law expert and is currently a PhD researcher in African animal law at Birmingham City University. Right after graduating from her law degree in Nigeria, Mo went on to obtain a Master of Laws in Public International Law and Animal Law from Babcock University and Lewis and Clark Law School, respectively. Mo's doctorate investigates the text, history, and implementation of Africa's strongest animal protection policies. Mo serves on many boards and has engaged in research for the Cambridge Center for Animal Rights Laws. Mo has also presented her research at prestigious conferences, including UK Comparative Animal Law Workshop, Radboud Conference, and UIA Roundtable on International Animal Law and Rabies in West Africa Conference. So I know you are also excited to be part of this webinar because most times people often ask, do we really have laws related to our animals, especially in Nigeria? And to me, to be sincere, I'll say I've not come across any, or I don't know of any. So I'm so excited, to learn today that what the law says, and let's keep the engagement going. So over to you, Mo. Thank you so much for honoring this invitation.
Okay, so thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, really, before I get into the presentation, I think it's important to highlight that this is just one out of many animal laws. One of the questions I guess asked a lot is, do we really have animal welfare laws in Nigeria? Do we really have laws that protect animals? And I've actually seen research papers say that we don't, and that Africa or maybe Nigeria does not have laws that protect animals and people just do what they want. People doing what they want might be true, but we do have great laws, really. I think I've been involved in animal law and policy for the past maybe 5-6 years now. And I think that Nigeria has the strongest laws I've ever seen in animal protection, at least on paper. I think the enforcement discussion is another discussion for today, but I'm saying on paper, we have, I think the law we're reviewing today is the Lagos State Animal Law, but really we have some national laws. The Criminal Code Act is extremely strong. We have the Endangered Species Act, we have the National Parks Wildlife Act, we have the Dogs Act, and in fact, all states have dogs law in that they have domesticated. So in terms of having strong legislation on paper, I'm convinced that even better than the Humane Slaughter Act of the US or the Animal Welfare Act in the UK, what these laws represent are very good. Unfortunately, and I did some research into this, for example, the section 450, 485 of the Criminal Code, there's been no prosecution since 1960. So I think in that respect, we're in trouble. But anyway, I would like to set my timer so I don't go beyond the time allotted to me. Yes, so the Lagos State Animals Law 2022. Today we're going to be looking at that law. And I think it would spark a lot of thought, a lot of conversation, and a lot interest really, so that we can have an idea of what laws we have in Lagos State in particular. And this is the newest legislation that we have. It's the strongest that we have in the country, and there's a lot of potential within it, but it was passed in 2022, and we're almost at the 3 year, we're at the 3 year mark, and still we haven't seen much. But let's look at the legislation. So what happened that the law came into? So what happened, and I think you might remember this story, and this story is particularly important to me because it was a story that kind of, one of the stories that got me really involved in animal law policy in Nigeria. So sometime in 2019, an Indian man was found with a pet. He rented an apartment in Muri-Okunola Street in Victoria Island, and he brought in a lion. It wasn't a cub, wasn't a baby lion, so it was a full-grown big lion, and he put it in the rented apartment, and the neighbors were able to see that lion, and they alerted the government. It took them a couple of days to respond, but we had the Lagos State Environmental Sanitation and Special Offences Unit actually come to investigate the property and see what was going on. It was that incident that I remember my dad is also on the call, so thank you, sir, for being here. But I remember my dad sending that link to me and asking me what I thought, since I told him about the project topic that I was going to be investigating. And I thought, well, it can't be right that a man has a lion in a very residential area. In fact, there's a school on that street, right? So I knew it couldn't be right. But at the time, this is 2019, there were no laws. I mean, there's no law prohibiting anybody from owning pets. There's laws on animal cruelty. There's laws that state that, well, if you're going to have any animal, you can't be cruel, provide food and water and things like that. Don't kick, don't beat, and don't kill in an inhumane way. But we didn't have anything that actually prevented people from owning whatever animal that they had. So that was some gap that I found in 2019, but I didn't think that it was going to be this quick that the Lagos State government was going to respond. And thankfully, in February of 2022, a lot of process, since the Indian man was caught with his lion, a number of incidents followed. And I think the government began to see the need for legislation that was actually going to address this issue. And on the 9th of February, the law was passed. The law didn't have a lot of publicity, of course, which is why many people don't even know about the law. But it's still law. In fact, the law isn't even publicly available. I was following the case, so I knew that the law was passed, but we couldn't find the law. So I had to reach out to the Attorney General and a number of people who were on that board to try and have access to the law. And even at they didn't have access to the law, which is interesting. But I was able to get the hard copy of the Lagos State laws, the updated version, and then I had to scan them. And if anybody wants them, I'm very happy to give them to you so that you can have a look at what laws guide the keeping of animals. But really, it's important to note that these laws only relate to Lagos State. So if you're joining here from another city, another state in Nigeria, it's okay. The laws don't readily apply to you just yet. Maybe Oyo State or Kebbi might have a law soon. But for now, this is just Lagos State animals. And I do expect, because I know that Oyo State is already in that conversation on how they can actually have very specific and stronger laws to regulate the keeping of pets in residential homes, among other issues. So really, the law itself states its purpose, and it says it's a law to regulate the ownership, the licensing, the care, the sale of pets, and to prohibit or restrict persons from having custody of animals that are dangerous to the public and for connected purposes, right? So there are a number of issues with the law, as we would expect. So what I did was I did some investigation into the people who were involved in the drafting of the law. There are a number of drafts of the law, about 4 or 5, but this is the final, what I'm speaking from is the final law that was actually passed in 2022. And one of the things that is not in the law is there's no definition of an animal. And for an amateur listening, hearing this, that there's no definition of an animal might not seem like such a big deal. But when you look at what has happened for other jurisdictions, it becomes a very serious issue. For example, we had, there was a story of a person who started growing snails in one of the states in the US. And one of the arguments when they got to court was snails don't qualify as animals because they define animals as vertebrates, right? So they would not want to include some certain animals, in quotes, like maybe slugs or worms. But this man had a number of snails that were growing in his backyard and ended up causing a very serious problem with the community because they kept laying eggs and it just kept spreading and spreading, and it caused people to lose some of their vegetation in their property. So this law doesn't define an animal. So I do predict that if we do have any litigation in the future based on a prosecution or some violation of this law, there might be a problem there, because I imagine somebody who is wearing slugs in their backyard in Victoria Island and saying, well, this law doesn't apply to me because we don't know what an animal is. But the law does define a dangerous animal, which is interesting because it defines a dangerous animal as any animal of a kind specified in the second schedule of the law. So this presentation today, I'm first going to talk about the law, and I'm actually going to project the hard copy law so that some of us can have access and actually see what is, enforced in Lagos State, but also the schedule to the law. So we have a schedule that was annexed to the law that lists, I think, about 35 animals, and those animals are termed as dangerous. Interestingly, bees are on that list, dogs are on that list, cats are on that list, but I'll project and then we can have maybe discussions after the presentation to see what animals the Lagos State government deems to be dangerous and why you need a permit to have these animals at whatever stage. So whether they are in their early stage, maybe a puppy or a cub or a kitten, you still need a permit to have them and some vaccination requirements. But it's important to know that research facilities are exempted. So for example, if the research facilities in universities or private research facilities are exempted. But this itself is also contradictory because the animal welfare provisions in section 35 and section 13 actually do not, they prohibit animals from being used in experiments. Yet those experimental facilities are exempted from the provisions of the law. So we have a problem here, right? So, and I think one of the things we can also talk about is if people also have more thoughts as to the different things that might be problematic to enforce. Don't forget the title of the presentation is it progressive legislation or is it paper tiger? And I guess we'll have an answer at the end. But a pet is defined in the law, and it defines a pet as a domestic animal kept for pleasure rather than utility. And that's interesting because I wonder if I had an elephant, for example, if I had an elephant and I'm keeping the elephant for pleasure, does that put an elephant in a pet, in the category of pets, at least for the purposes of this law? It's going to be very difficult to enforce. I envisage that because I think the drafters did not take into cognizance some of the pitfalls that other jurisdictions are facing. And so I think we just decided what a pet is. I think if we write that a pet is any domestic animal kept for pleasure rather than utility, it's extremely broad. People keep, traditionally wild animals as pets. I mean, there's communities in the northern part of Nigeria that have hyenas, which are very wild animals. Even some cobras, I think monkeys, they have them as pets. They're domesticated, but they can still harm people. So there's no clear line between that. But the Lagos State says it includes birds, includes birds, cats, dogs, fish, hamsters, mice, ferrets, and other animals that are tamed or associated with the human environment. I think every animal is associated with the human environment. So this is obviously one point, at least for the paper tiger, because we really don't know what the law means. But it says that people are prohibited from having animals that may present a danger to the public without a license. So it means that if you have an animal that may present danger to the public, if you have a license, it's okay. So the goal is to get people to be licensed, not necessarily, and this is the spirit of the law really, is to get people to apply for a license. Of course, you pay a fee to the Lagos State government, and when you get that license, you can go ahead and keep any animal that you want. And I think there should be restrictions, really, especially considering the main issue, which was the Indian man who had a lion in a residential neighborhood. And he claimed that that lion was for security purposes. The penalty for keeping a pet without a license is 25,000 naira. But if you do keep a wild animal, it will be 500,000 naira or 6 months at the minimum. So we have that distinction. And this, the fact that we have the distinction in the law about the penalty lets us know that if you do choose, it depends on how you present your case. So if you do have a whale, for example, and I say whale, it's funny, but it's one of the animals in the annex that the Lagos state government says you can have a whale in your backyard as long as you get a license. This is what the law says. So, well, if it depends on how you present your case to the investigation units. If you present your case as an animal, maybe you're keeping your whale as a pet, or you were keeping your dog as a wild animal. It really depends on you. So these are the little things that are involved in the law that cause a problem. But let's look at the qualification for a license. For you to have this license to hold any animal, really, you must be 18 years at the minimum and mentally fit. They don't tell us how to certify that a person is mentally fit to hold an animal. And then you also must sign a declaration that you fulfill two conditions. First, you will hold the animal in secure accommodation, which is like in a place where the animal cannot escape, like a cage or like a kennel. And the second thing is that you will supply that animal with adequate food and suitable drink and bedding materials for the animal. And this is relative to any animal. So even if you have a goldfish, for example, in your sitting room or like a mini aquarium, near your kitchen, you would have to supply your animal with suitable food. Although there are problems with this, because how does the Lagos state government enforce this? If I do choose to have a catfish as a pet and I put it right next to my work table, how does the Lagos state government know if I give my catfish pellets as I should? But once you have a license, one of the things that you sign to is that the Lagos state government can visit you at any time on their way, just to come and check on the status of your animal. For people who had animals before the law came into being in 2022, they had 90 days to apply for a license. If not, they'll be held liable. Another thing that the law, and don't forget that one of the purposes of the law was to regulate the sale as well of pets, because one of the things that happened in Lagos State around the time or shortly after the time of the Indian man was many pet breeders, they got into some dubious practices, which ended up in some very terrible living conditions for dogs. So there were people who went to certain breeders to buy dogs, and the state of those animals were appalling. So one of the things that the law does, or probably is doing, if anybody has information on how far the law has progressed, if your house has been visited or you've applied for a license, it would be nice to hear from you. But up till now, and I've asked, some of the people I know that are involved in the work, there hasn't been anyone who has applied for a license. And we do know that there are many dog keepers or even cat keepers in Lagos State. Some might even be on this call, who knows? Right, so pet stores will be regularly visited by officials just to ensure that many of the provisions are being adhered to. And when you get a license, that license is valid for 12 months. So it's a yearly renewal. Now, I'd like us to get into business and look at the provisions really in Section 18 on animal welfare. And I'm just going to go right there so that we can see. I'd like us to look at the law exactly as it is in Section 18 because it's pretty interesting. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. Yes, so Section 18 tells us that any person who beats, kicks, overrides, tortures, or otherwise treats any animal so as to subject it to unnecessary pain or suffering, or being the owner permits any animal to be so treated willfully, or permits animal to be so treated, it lists a number of offenses, right? And what it does is it then states that, and I will go through the offenses together, but one of the things it says is if any of that happens, then you are liable to 100,000 naira, 100,000 naira, or 3 months custodial sentence, or both for your first time. And if you offend again, you'll be liable to 150,000 naira or 6 months custodial sentence, or both if you are a repeat offender. So let's look. So number one is beating, kicking, overriding, torturing, or treating any animal to subject it to unnecessary pain or suffering. Now, this is very problematic because this phrase unnecessary pain, I mean, there's so much case law in the United Kingdom about unnecessary pain and suffering. It's a very, very vague terminology. For example, if I owned a dog and, it's difficult to even find, really, it's difficult to find people who will be cruel, who will beat, kick, override, or torture an animal. But if, for example, my neighbor spied on me and found me and sent a video to the Lagos State Licensing Unit, right? Unnecessary pain or suffering is a very difficult thing to prove because I could argue, for example, that this is how I discipline my dog. I'm training my dog to be a guard dog and I have to let my dog know what's right or what's wrong. Number two is anybody who willfully and unreasonably administers any injurious drug or injurious substance to any animal. I think we kind of know this. These are people who inject. I think some people do this, and I've read some stories about this. They inject some hard drugs that make the dog high. So in Lagos State, that's a crime. Number three is anybody that carries or conveys in any vehicle, or any means of transport in any manner that subjects it to unnecessary pain or suffering. This provision is important because we have an Animal and Diseases Control Act in Nigeria of 2022, which was one of the things that President Buhari did before he left office. That law actually targets farmed animals, but the Nigerian legislation calls it trade animals. And one of the things that it says is every 15 kilometers, the driver or the person moving cattle must stop and actually give the animals some food, water, and actually time to rest. Right. So Lagos State government kind of waters down that provision a little bit by saying, well, if you're going to convey or carry your animal through any means of transport, road, sea, air travel, you must do it in such a way that you are not subject to unnecessary pain or suffering. But that itself is interesting. For example, if I were carrying my dog from Lagos to Abuja by air, and it is cheaper for me to put the dog in the cargo rather than pay for its seats in the aircraft, would that be unnecessary pain or suffering? I don't know. I guess the Lagos State government will have to decide that. Next one is any person who keeps or confines any animal in a cage or other receptacle which does not measure sufficiently in height, length, and breadth to allow it a reasonable opportunity for movement. I think we know that. I think it means that our kennels or wherever we're storing our animals, and we're going to look at some of the animals in the schedule, for example, the whales or the sharks that the Lagos State government has deemed that people can have. It says if you're going to have that in your house, in your private property, make sure that the animal has enough space to exhibit its natural abilities. Another one is if you are the owner, you neglect to exercise or cause to be exercised unreasonably any animal habitually chained up. And I think a lot of people are guilty of this. Having an animal chained all day. It's very common. People do it, they put them in front of their houses. It's illegal in Lagos State. Now, another one is without reasonable cause, you abandon an animal in circumstances that render it likely to suffer pain by reason of starvation or thirst. And people do this really. So people want to travel, maybe to another state or even outside the country. They kind of leave a lot of food around, right? And hope that the dog will just, or the cat or whichever pet they have, will just suddenly find these animals suddenly find the food and stay. And sometimes you come and you find that your dog is ill or is sick. Lagos State is outlawing that activity. And another one is being the owner, you permit your animal to go at large. And I think this is important because some people try to use it to threaten maybe people debt collectors, for example. I mean, there was a time that dogs were let loose on NEPA officials in Ketu in Lagos State. So this is, I mean, we know that that is illegal, but also it's also illegal by virtue of this act because you are using your dog or any animal for criminal purposes. Another one is when you mutilate or kill an animal by using the method of strike shine. I think some lethal injection in the heart or any other unnecessarily cruel manner. This is interesting. This is interesting because it doesn't necessarily tell us how to put a dog down. So, for example, you have a dog that is inflicted with maybe rabies or some other disease that is just not feasible to keep the dog or the pets alive. And well, this law tells us what not to do. And it says unnecessarily cruel manner. But I don't know if there's any way to put a dog down or put any pets down that will not be cruel. I guess we can have discussions about that. All right. So these are the main provisions, but just to highlight, we're still in section 18. Subsection L says that solely with a view to providing entertainment, if you confine an animal. I think animal circuses in the traditional sense as we know it from the Western world, it's not very common to Nigeria, but I used to think that until I realized that many communities have animal fights, which is outlawed by the criminal code, though. But many communities have animal fights that are part of what people do on weekends. They bring their rams, they have like horn fights. Sometimes we have like dogs fighting, they kind of give them some substances that get them very aggressive and then they fight. And then people come and watch. Sometimes people pay to watch these shows and these tricks. And Lagos State is saying that animals used in entertainment is not allowed. So you can't use it for animal fighting or anything, or even competitions where money is involved. So that's important. And I do know that these things continue to take place. But anyway, we have provisions on animal cruelty in section 34. I would give everybody the law, as many as wanted, so they can view it. But really, and I'll quickly go there in section 34, is it's quite a packed law. Yes. What we have in section 34 is basically kind of like a stronger form of what we have in Nigeria's criminal code. That is the one that applies not in Lagos State, but the entire federation. And it says even when you do have an animal and you're not going against the contraventions in section 18, when you do have an animal, there's some things you can't do. You can't neglect the animal. You can't be reckless regarding its health and welfare. You need to have the animal have regular visits, right? So the penalty for that is 500,000 naira, similar to that of the wild animal, or a 3-month custodial sentence. So you have to keep that in mind when keeping your pets. Now, going back to the slide, and I tie this up as I round up now so that we can begin to think about the impact of this law and where exactly we're headed. What we know, and this is what Punch reported. Punch reported that when the neighbors, I'm going back to the story that led to the law, when the neighbors reported that the man had a lion in his house, what happened was the Lagos State Enforcement Unit went to the man and told the man to report to them. This is what we have at this time. He told the man to report to them as to the reason for the animal, how did he get in, what's the purpose, and this and that. Now, if the man really went, we don't know. If the man went and had a case, we don't know. But what happened was a couple days later, the enforcement leader, I think his name is Kayode, I forget his last name. I think his name is Kayode something. One of the things that he said was the lion will be euthanized and then transferred to a zoo. Which also raises interesting questions because to euthanize an animal means the animal is killed, but then transferred to a zoo. Is it the carcass? Is it for research? We don't know. But one of the questions I think in my mind, I guess as an animal welfare advocate, is what happened to the lion? We don't know. As of now, we know that the lion was definitely taken out of the property, but that's all we know. We know that the Indian left that apartment in Victoria Island with the lion. The animal could well be in Chibok. It could be, it could be in your backyard. We don't know what happened to the lion. And I think these are important questions to ask, especially from an animal welfare perspective. Is, well, this lion didn't choose to be in the backyard of this man who had him in the backyard. But now that he's been found, now that it's been deemed unlawful, where is the animal? What happens next to the animal? You know, and if anybody has information, I guess it's important. But more than that particular incident, I think about the future of this law. And I think about, well, if we do, for example, have a raid in a property and dogs are seized or cats are seized or any of the animals are seized, what happens to them? The law says they go to a shelter. I don't know of any animal shelters in Lagos State. And even if they are, I can't really vouch for how suitable those shelters will be for the animals. So these are things I think we should think of when we think of these laws. It's one thing to punish the offenders who violate the law, but it's another thing to think about the welfare of such animals who are deceased or who are victims. I like to think they're also victims of the law because sometimes they're irresponsible owners. Many of these animals don't choose to be kept in such dangerous situations. But I'd like to bring to us an incident that happened sometime last year in March. And I followed this story very closely because it was dear to my heart. I think a number of us might have heard about this. Now, a woman had an American people, somewhere in Lagos as well. These issues always happen in Lagos, well, that we hear about. And the dog got lost. It ran out of the compound, and they couldn't find the dog for a number of days. And one time, the lady's brother was walking by the estate in search of this dog, whose name is Roxy, and finally saw the dog in the property of like a mansion type house, kind of like, I think Nigerians call it a big man's house. And they could see the dog, and the guy goes, "Oh my God, that's Roxy, that's Roxy." But I think what we heard happened was Roxy lost, just moving around, saw this gate open and got into the property. And right there and then, I watched the clip. I was sad to watch the clip, but I watched it. The dog was shot by the security officer multiple times, really in the neck, and the dog died. And a lot of people began to talk. I mean, the Dog Welfare Group of Nigeria spoke. Many people just were on and on about it. And I kept thinking, we have an animals law in Lagos State, and then there were many articles that wrote about how poor Nigeria's animals laws were. And if we had good laws, I remember seeing a post that if we had good laws, this type of thing shouldn't have happened. And I was like, oh my God, we do have good laws. I don't know if we have the will to prosecute though, but we do have good laws. I think the Lagos State Animals Law was designed for things like that, but nothing happened. I think there was a lot of noise. The girl actually was, I think Arise News featured this story, and a number of other people actually, a number of other big media houses, and Justice for Roxy was actually a hashtag on X, but nothing ever happened. Roxy died, the girl was sad, and that's it. And we don't have dangerous dog legislation because some people brought up the argument about an American people being a dangerous dog, but dangerous dog legislation is not applicable in Nigeria. We only have the Dogs Act, and it has nothing to do with any particular breed. So whether you had a pit bull or you had a Chihuahua, it wouldn't matter. A dog is a dog, right? But nothing justifies the unlawful killing. The law says that if you do see an animal, report to the licensing unit in the local government area, which they had in that community in Lagos State. But nothing happened. Roxy died, and there's no justice, at least until today, in March of 2025, which is about a year after. There's been no justice for Roxy or Roxy's owners, despite there being an animals law in Lagos State. So I present the question to you. Based off of what we've discussed this evening, what do you think about the legislation? Is it progressive, maybe on paper, or is it just paper tiger in light of recent occurrence? So I still have a number of minutes, and I'm glad we have the time. And I'd like us together to look at the animals law schedule. This is, I think, perhaps the most interesting part of this law. So what happens for people without a legal background? When we have a law, sometimes there's like a schedule attached to the law that explains some certain things that has been said in the law. Now, this schedule, actually what it says, it lists some animals, and it says, if you want to keep any of these animals, you can, but you must apply for a license and fulfill the requirements stated in the law. And in my presentation, I already looked at some of those requirements, which is number one, that it must be 18 years and above and mentally fit. And number two, you must confirm and write and sign an undertaking that you give the animal access to suitable food, water, and bedding, and also sufficient space to exercise movement. Now let's look at the animals in the schedule of this law. Number one is dog. It's interesting. Sometimes when I look at this list, it seems as if the lawmakers, and this is my personal opinion, I could be wrong, but it seems as if the lawmakers sat down and any animal that came to mind, they added it to this list, right? Because some animals, looking at it, and I hope you can see my screen, some animals, I'm just like, okay. This is definitely interesting. So we have dogs here, we have cats, we have donkeys. The word dog is interesting because it's a very large species. And I mean, I'm not a biologist, but I do know that there's some thin line between dogs and wolves and certain animals, foxes as well in that thing. But they tell us it's Canis lupus familiaris, and I guess maybe they're experts on the call that can tell us what it means. But I know the word dog is pregnant, and I've seen this fail in Finland. I've seen this fail in UK legislation, just writing the word dog. When you say dog, what do you mean? What species are you talking about? What if a dog is crossbred? Things like that. Then we have cats, and I think that would apply to the same problem would apply. We have donkeys as well. We have a water buffalo. We have honeybees, which is interesting. Remember I said at the beginning of the session that the law actually doesn't define what an animal is. And we have jurisdictions that have expressly said that, sorry about that, that insects are not included in the definition of animals. But Lagos State government thinks that honeybees in particular, maybe not the other bees, but honeybees, if you want to have honeybees in your backyard, you definitely need a license. We have camels, we have horse, we have domestic silk moths, we have yaks, we have llamas, we have alpacas, ferrets, gayals, domesticated red foxes, domesticated hedgehogs, elephants, fallow deers, leeches. Leeches aren't animals. I think they're insects. Well, depends on what the Lagos State government thinks that animal will be. But we have peafowls, alligators, moose, ostrich, stoats, hamsters, monkeys, python, snake. And I present another conflict here. Lagos State has python on that list, and it also has snake on that list. And I think, and I know that a python is a snake. So sometimes my image of this view is what you list an animal, we add it to the list. You list an animal, we add it to the list. And this is what causes problem. And I guess Nigeria is shielded by the poor enforcement. So this situation is not the conflict. I think it'd be difficult for a court to actually come in contact with this and decide how to dictate which species are actually covered by the law or not. But anyway, we have whales, we have sharks, which is interesting. How does a person have a whale in their backyard? I've never heard of that. We have dolphins as well, gorillas, chimpanzees, apes, baboons, pangolins. Pangolins raise an interesting question because of CITES. You might have heard of CITES. CITES is the convention for the international trade in endangered species. And this law actually prevents people from having pangolins or transporting pangolins. But Lagos is saying you can have pangolins in our state as long as you get a license. So we have that conflict between national law, well, state law, and international law. But we also have crocodiles. Lagos State government is letting us know that if you do want to have a crocodile or an alligator in your backyard, it's fine as long as you're over 18 and you're mentally fit. We have lions, we have tigers, we have leopards, jaguars, and any other animal as the commissioner may designate. This brings me to the close of this presentation. And really, I think it's supposed to spark thoughts in our heads, in our minds, really, about what the future of animal protection can look like. What do you think it could look like if we enforce these laws? Do you have dogs in Lagos State that you haven't reported, that you don't have a license for? Or do you have animals that really are not expressing themselves in a manner that they're naturally accustomed to? But these are the issues, and I'll leave you to decide. Thank you very much, and that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Wow, this is interesting, amazing. A lot of questions I have for you. Thank you, everyone. I hope you got value from this presentation. Till now, we've been having issues about do we really have laws or do we just have them on paper? And now, at least we can see the copy that was just showed to us about the laws in Lagos State. So I have lots of questions, but I would, let me see, for the participants, please, if you have any question, feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you want to speak, just let me know, then I'll unmute you. Thank you so much, Moeson. I have loads of questions for you, and I think we have time. Let me just check if we have time. Okay, we still have 20 minutes for Q&A. So my first question is that this particular law, like you said, is just for Lagos State. Do you have idea whether other states have similar laws, or why specifically are you focusing on that of Lagos State?
Till now, I don't have any information that any other state in Nigeria has passed a law similar to this. I think Lagos State is the first. I do hope that many states also begin to take this seriously, but it's not necessary that I'm focusing on Lagos State. It's that Lagos State is the only one that we can focus in terms of state legislation that protects animal welfare. The rest are national: the Animal Disease Control Act, the Criminal Code, the Endangered Species Act, and things like that. But Lagos State, apart from the dogs law, Lagos State is the only state in Nigeria as of today that has any law that regulates animal cruelty or animal welfare.
Wow, that's interesting to know. Thank you so much. You were talking about the criteria for somebody to be licensed to have a pet. And like you said, the age 18 plus, mentally fit. What is the definition of being mentally fit? And I was waiting to see part of the rules or criteria that would say maybe they have to undergo some training and at least to let them know one or two things before they are sure that this animal will be safe with this person. Is there anything like that?
Absolutely nothing like
You
that.
guys,
We
I
have the
want
same
you to quickly,
questions.
sorry, you guys, I want you to ask all your questions. And just one favor from you, I don't know if it's possible for you to send me a scanned copy of this so I can share with the group. I want everybody to be aware of, and they can also talk about it, when they're having lectures, and they can also share. And I think it's going to help us, please. I will appreciate if you.
Definitely, definitely. And if you find me on LinkedIn and you also want the law as well, I'll send it to her, but you can always reach out to me or send me an email and I'll send you the law. Well, I have the same questions too. The law just says that you have to be mentally fit. It's interesting. What does that even mean? There's no certification by a medical professional that I'm mentally fit. But I think also another thing that's important is the training thing you mentioned, because I would expect that to have a whale, I think having a whale in your backyard is not just illegal, it's impossible to have a living whale in your backyard. But I'm saying, for example, an animal like a llama or a yak, which I don't think are even native to Nigeria, but say, for example, you decide to have that, or an alligator at the back of your property. I think you do need some training. I don't think anybody can handle that, the presence of an alligator as a pet. I think we've heard of many popular people who have actually died and they've been handling for years, which is why many jurisdictions don't even allow you to apply for a license to have an alligator. It's just unreasonable. Even baboons, really, people, I think because we see them in UI Zoo or some zoos, we think that they can be domesticated. They are wild animals, and wild animals are no joke, just like chimps. Chimps might be even easier to domesticate, but it's an arduous task. And that's why many jurisdictions just say for the safety of our residential neighborhoods, no wild animals. But Lagos State government thinks that if you can pay for a license, you should be able to have an alligator in your backyard.
Thank you for the presentation. I follow you as you presented, and I got much from your presentation. But I think I will have more of comments than questions, because in the first place, for all the animals listed, just as you said, probably they were just listing animal that comes to their mind. When developing a such law, I think what should have been done was to look around what are the common animals that we find in the environment and what regulations should be in place to manage them. And a question I will ask on that, for those laws to have been formed, I want to know whether there was any public opinion in terms of a survey to see people's opinion of what kind of animals are common in their area and what their dispositions are. That is, how do they feel about those animals before coming up with those laws? Because for law to work, it must be people-oriented. So I want to ask that question.
Okay, so well, unfortunately, I was not on the drafting board, so I don't know. I did reach out to someone who was on the board, and she said the focus of the law was basically to just let people know that they cannot sell. It was basically about the sale of pets. And I was like, ma, it's not just sale. The provisions in this law are more than just the sale of pets. It includes, my point is her response wasn't adequate. And she was the chair of the committee, which I thought was also interesting. So I don't have that answer, but about the public opinion, I would expect that every law that gets passed in Lagos State follows the due process. Now, I didn't hear of any public opinion. Maybe I missed that, but I don't think it happened. But I did see different versions on the internet, but it wasn't a call for opinions. And in the different versions, the same schedule never changed. So I don't think there was something very formal to kind of get the residents to ask these questions. But apart from even getting the residents, I even think expert opinion is important. Because I think the presence of an animal, maybe not even an animal law expert, an animal behavior expert, or even a biologist, a zoologist would be able to see that a yak is not native to Nigeria. We'll be able to see that a pangolin is actually illegal to have in terms of international that Nigeria is a party to. So it's one end to have the people's view on what they think, but it's another thing to think about, is this even possible to have a shark in a backyard? Can you have a license to maintain a shark? How much water would you have, or a dolphin? It's definitely an interesting law.
Okay, so I could get your view on that, because that's one of the problems with that law. Just as expert opinion matters, so public opinion matters, because it's when people feel that this animal is a threat to us in the environment that it could be legislated. And that leads to another question, where in communities domestic animals are reared and people complain about their behavior, particularly in terms of messing up the environment, eating up their crops, and so on. And community says that if you must keep an animal, confine it in your environment so that it doesn't disturb anyone. Now in the law that says we cannot tie animal, does that not contradict that? If animal will not, because we are talking of natural behavior of animal, it means animal must be able to move about. Now the law says it must not, it should not be tied down, and at the same time is becoming a threat. Because when we say threat, it is not until it is fatal or is brutal. Because when an animal comes to destroy my things, it's a threat. So is that not contradiction in that regard?
It's contradictory. Many of the provisions in that law, I think they contradict national laws, and they contradict some, maybe common sense is also the word too, and international laws. So I don't know.
Okay, ma. So my other comments are that well, it's obvious that the law, not just in Lagos State, even at federal level, are paper tiger.
Yeah.
Because animal law supposed to face common animals and the conflict ensuing from it. But that is not addressed, and that's not and I don't think that is the focus. So I think it's a general problem with our system in Nigeria, and it's quite unfortunate. It's the way they have sat in a corner to draft this animal policy or law. Is the same thing they do when it comes to policy or law to govern humans, without really seeing the orientation to really allow for quality living. And that's the problem. And I think more of the law should focus on domestic animals around us and see how it affects people. So that's my contribution. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Prof. I appreciate your kind comments. So I can see a question in the comments section by Zeno Bennett. And yes, there is a, because I mean, there's no way the presentation will allow me to look at every part of the law, but it does say that if there are any contraventions, your license can be revoked. But once again, paper tiger, because we don't even have anybody who has applied for a license. Talk less of having the license expire after 12 months or having it revoked, right? But you mentioned that the people who put forward the law did so from the perspective of farmed animals. I don't necessarily think so. I think they just thought about animals in a broad sense. You know why? Because even in the schedule, how many farmed animals are there? Not many. We don't even have pigs there, which is one of the major farmed animals that Nigeria farms. We don't have pigs there. We don't have goats there. It's just some sex, like yaks. We have yaks, we have sharks, we have gorillas. We have animals that are even endangered in that list. So I think it's just people just thinking, well, let's put as many animals. Like, for example, there's a slug, there are leeches there. Leeches are not even vertebrates. It's interesting. I think somebody had their hand up.
I think,
ma'am.
I don't know why she withdrew her,
Yes,
lowered her hand. Are you still, do
thank
you
you.
want to, okay,
Yes, ma'am. I'm still
please go
here,
on.
ma'am.
Okay, go on,
Thank
please.
you very much, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Well done, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. It's really insightful and very, very interesting. But I want to clarify that something. I don't know if I get this right. In the license, I don't know if you mentioned, apart from the fact that the person to when an individual want to be able to own such animals, you they ascertain that the person should be of age, 18 years of age, and other things then listed. Is there a mention that the animal, for instance, the dog, should be vaccinated so as to not to endanger the people in the community or the people who are in the surrounding? Because I'm more particular about this dog because of the recent happenings that the things I've witnessed and that I usually hear, well, I have heard of that of victims that had dog bites and some of them even backing to death and the likes like that. So are there any provisions that, apart from being of age and mentally fit and some other things, should be animals be vaccinated in case of animals that can transmit infection to individuals in the community? And then when does it also mean that when an individual is licensed to own an animal, if such animal should pose threat or endanger the lives of individuals in the community, what is there any penalty for the owner of that pet if such things happen? Or the fact that the person has become licensed, does it make the person free of any charges or whatsoever? And then the fee, the penalty fee of 25,000 naira and then 500,000 naira per month for owning a wild animal, to me, do you really think, ma, that amount is enough to to me 25,000 naira? Is it really something that can make people not to want to violate the law? Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate them. Very excellent questions. To your first question about the provision in the law that mandates the animal to be vaccinated, yes, there is. What I spoke about was the requirements for the individual, but there are also requirements for the animal itself. It's a little loose, but it's kind of good because it says that animal must have had necessary vaccination. I mean, I think it's probably more straightforward for animals that we are accustomed to having, like dogs and cats, but I wonder how I would vaccinate my leech or my honeybee, for example. But they do have that provision, so we'll give them. I think 25 is really, you see, penalty. There are lots of studies on whether penalty really works or not, because the truth is, I don't think that the reason people are not keeping the law is because of the penalty. So, for example, even if it were, I don't know, 20 million naira, I don't think that would really cause enforcement, right? Because we see this in the cyberbullying acts and things like that. People don't know, people don't care. Nigerians don't know, Nigerians don't care. So I guess this might be one of the situations where, just like the spraying of the naira, one scapegoat will come and the Lagos State will be like, yes, we have that law, you have to pay this. So I think I would do, if I were the lawmaker, I might increase the penalty a little higher than 25,000 naira. But another thing I think is it's better than the criminal code. The criminal code is 50 naira. That's criminal code Nigeria. It's 50 naira. So if people wanted to be cruel, that's for cruelty though. If people wanted to be cruel to their animals, honestly, I think you can be cruel for depends on your pay grade, but you can be cruel for every day of the year and you might not go broke. So yes.
Okay, thank you, ma, for the response. And the second question was that, is there any consequence for animal that has been licensed, but when a licensed animal endanger the life of?
Yes. Okay, yes, I remember the question now. When you have these animals subject to conditions. So the goal is that when you do get that license, you are licensed to keep this animal subject to these conditions. So if you violate the conditions, they'll take the animal from you, they'll take your license from you.
Yeah.
So even when you do have that, I think that's a good part of the law. I think we should give them credit in that respect, that you don't just have the license and it ends there. You have the license subject to some conditions, because we have some people who, maybe because of some issues, mental health issues, or even poverty, they're not able to care for the animal as they should. So if the veterinary enforcement officer in Lagos, they gets on your property and sees that your dog is hungry, Your license will be taken from you and your dog will be taken from you as well.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay.
I see a question from Zeno Bennett. How do they check that the owners or the intended owners of these animals have properly complied? The law says that a veterinary officer will take scheduled visits. Like, they won't tell you when they're coming. You just knock on the door and say, "Where's your dog? Where's your leash? Where's your shark?" Whichever animal you got the license from, and they can just come and check. So it says there'll be periodic visits to check that the people who have the license are actually keeping the animals in line with the license. We don't know how that will really play out, because I know they will have to knock on the door, but that's their goal in terms of how to monitor people complying with the law.
Can I pinch on that a bit?
Yes.
In Nigeria, we don't register our address. And for instance, if you are not the owner of the house and you have to move from one, how will they know you have moved? So how will they monitor you? That's number one.
It's a good question.
And I was wondering, I raised the issue about training and registration, and I know that what about the issue of, having tags on the animal tracking? Because here, in the UK, I know, all these animals have this tracker on them. So even if they get missing, they know who owns it and, they can easily find it. So how will you know where this animal is? How will you know what actually happened to it in case, how will you be sure that it was actually sick and then it had died and something, or maybe it was due to abuse? How will you be able to trace even issues or incidences of animal abuse in this case? Do you want to talk about that?
I wish I had the answers. I don't know how they will track it. For example, in the UK, people who have dogs and cats are mandated to have microchips in them. Right, that way every animal can be tracked centrally. But there's no mandatory requirement to have a microchip on your whale or your honeybee. So there's nothing nobody knows really. I think this is one of those laws that as things go forward, we'll know what exactly can work and cannot work. Because I don't think that the Lagos State government has a very definite plan for enforcement. I don't think so.
Okay, I think there is a question in the chat. Given the present state of the paper tiger law, what is the way forward and your recommendation? Do you have any recommendation yet, or you're still working on it?
Thank you for the question, Prof. It's a big question. I don't know. I mean, sometimes, as academics, we try to refrain from saying that we don't know, but really sometimes it's just the truth. I don't know. I think what I would recommend, at least for a start, is let's begin to ensure that the people who have pets in their home continue to have that opportunity to do so, subject to some conditions, right? Let's be sure that people don't have traditionally wild animals as pets. So before we even get to the regulating what kinds of dogs or what kind of cats, I think we can at least first ensure that people who are, because for example, we have people transporting many of these exotic animals through our customs into the country. I think working from there might be more effective than trying to get, because for example, there are some communities in Nigeria, well, even in Lagos State, that they don't have a dog that they can say this is the owner of the dog. They're community dogs, they're street dogs. So who gets the license for those dogs? We don't know. They eat from beans, people pet them. We might probably know that, okay, this house takes care of the dog, but the people in the house can be like, it's not my dog. They didn't purchase the dog. They don't even have any history of vaccination. But I think a good place is working with like customs, really, to ensure that wild animals are not domesticated. People don't domesticate alligators. People don't domesticate tigers, llamas, yaks. These are things that other countries have outlawed. Under no circumstance can people have a shark, in their homes. It's impossible, as I said. But even if, for example, you were rich enough to have like a very large aquarium, it should still be wrong, because the risk is very, very high. Not even just for the human purpose, but even the welfare of the shark. I hate to think that the shark will be comfortable to express its natural behaviors just by being in the backyard. No, because there are suits for example, Sea Life, one of the largest aquariums for like show and entertainment. They've been sued really because of how poor, and this is one of the best, of how poor the welfare of the dolphin is by performing those tricks and living in such a closed space. And this closed space is actually very large by number of houses put together. So how much more a single man resident in Lagos State? It's just not feasible.
So this issue of domesticating wild animals, in fact, I think we need, the issue of the zoo is a completely different thing. Despite the fact that we have zoos, what are the what will I call it now? The regulations in place that even the animals in a zoo that we all accept at least is still better than an individual, but we can see the nature of our zoos. What is the government or what is the law saying about having a zoo? And there is, I don't know, anytime I just visit, it's so heartbreaking to see the way the animals are. I love visiting zoos because I know I'll see an animal. I'm tired of seeing them on TV. I want to see them face to face. And so this is this, and also watch them. But what I mean is that even in our zoos, what are the regulations, specifications before they are being given the opportunity to keep those animals? Because most times you just see that after 1 or 2 years, all the animals are gone, and you now see their carcasses or the skin covering in the museum. Is that what we are here to look at? I'm here to look at the live animal, not here to look at the skin in the museum. So what have gone wrong? There's a whole lot of issue surrounding this. And one thing I want you to also notice is that you made mention of something in the criteria. Talked about the age, talked about being mentally fit. There is one thing I also picked. You said pet store regularly visited. I believe they are trying to say that you feed the animals properly, but what is the evidence that you visit the pet store? Do you have a card to show for it? Is that a law? How can you say how often you visit a pet store? Does that guarantee that you are taking care of the animal? What? In fact, if you visit the pet store too much, you need to be careful, because if you're always getting medication or drug, definitely you are not caring for that animal.
Yes.
So it's quite an interesting, session. Do we still have questions from the audience? Because of
Yeah,
that.
we have a comment from Mary Claire Obiamiri that says we need proper zoo management. And I completely agree.
Yeah,
I lived in Ibadan for a long time, still live there when I'm in Nigeria. And, going to like UI Zoo or there's a zoo in like Agodi Gardens, it's heartbreaking. Sometimes you see, they have a lion there. And the last time I saw that lion, my heart broke. Because I was just like, sometimes it might even be better for you to just put this lion down. It was so hungry, it was so sad. I even think I didn't even have the energy to even engage. It was terrible, really. And there are also arguments about really if zoos should really be, because sometimes when you look at these animals and what they go through in Nigerian zoos, it's scary. It's really, really scary. Even there were parrots there. I saw parrots. I saw like some certain species of birds. It was heartbreaking. So I think, yes, zoo management is good, but note that this the Lagos State's law does not apply to zoos. But it's a good point that Mary Claire raised.
So I think we have a hand here. After this, then we'll round up. Thank you so much. Ayola, kindly unmute. So
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your presentation, a good one. I would like to confirm if there is any law regarding animal show, like dog shows, ram fighting. Is there anything like that in the Lagos law? Thank you.
Yes, there is under Section 38, which is about Section 18 and 38 really about the animal welfare and animal cruelty, and it actually prohibits animals to be used in entertainment unnecessarily. Once again, we have a problem. How do we know what animal entertainment is necessary or unnecessary? We have a community that they do dog fighting, they do hyena fighting. They've been doing it since forever. So is that necessary? Is that unnecessary? I guess it will depend on the school of thought of the investigation unit, or if it gets to court, the judge involved. But the Lagos State has actually said, let me see if I can read that. The Lagos State government has actually said that, well, animals used in entertainment, they are outlawing it for fighting, for circuses, for a number of certain issues. So maybe you can also refer to the law if you have that time to be able to look at it, to be able to tell whether it can. But I think that if they outlaw it, they might face some challenges. And the challenges will be there's some things that have to do with culture. Some of these animal fights might even be religious. So how does a law come to abolish a religious practice? It might be difficult. Yeah. That's what I think. But you can refer to section, I'm looking at it right now, section 18, subsection L. Is strictly on animals used for entertainment, including fighting and baiting and all of that. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's it. 18 subsection L is where I would refer you to for that entertainment, animals using entertainment or fighting, baiting, or shooting, trophy hunting. Okay, I see Prof said something. What is the provision for handling of sick animals in the law? Yes, there are provisions in the law for handling of sick, well, they say animals infected with rabies or zoonotic diseases. And you have to report immediately to the nearest licensing unit with the animal. And they will now decide if the animal will be put down or treated. I think you fund the treatment though, but it's not you that would decide. If you have for example, if you have an animal infected with rabies, you definitely have to put that dog down. That's even what the dog's law of Lagos State says, which is not this law, but this law says report to the licensing unit and then they decide. So I assume that they will be deciding if it's for rabies in line with the dog's law of that state. I see another question. What is the level of awareness of the law in the state? Well, for everybody I've told, there was like, wow, just like many of you here. Wow, we have this law in Lagos State. So I don't think the level of awareness is very high. There wasn't even a lot of publicity. There's more publicity about the incidents. There was more publicity about Roxy, for example, or even the Indian man than there was about the fact that we have this law and we have these provisions. So we don't have any TV show or anything that actually kind of talks about these issues. We have not heard about the activities of, maybe sometime this year, who knows, but we've not heard about the activities of these people yet. So maybe in the coming months, and maybe it's a challenge to Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. Maybe this is your next project.
Oh, do we still have questions? This is a whole lot to take in, and yes.
Yes.
Okay, Prof, go on.
It's in the chat. I just sent it. I was typing when you asked.
Okay, is the focus mainly on pets and wildlife animals? It's like farm animals are not inclusive.
I think, well, they're inclusive. We can't say they're not inclusive. They're inclusive because some of the animals in schedule are inclusive and they don't define animals. So we don't really know. But I would say it seems like they have some specific provisions that apply to pets and wild animals. But generally, I think would apply to animals in a general sense, even farmed animals. That would be what my opinion is. But at the same time, there's no exclusion. There's an exclusion in the criminal code for slaughterhouses. That's the abattoirs. But there's no exclusion in the Lagos state law for their own slaughterhouses. So I don't know how the Lagos state government wants to enforce these provisions in the Alade meat market. I don't know what their goal is, but it might make sense to exempt it because I'm not sure how feasible it will be that animals raised for food are subject to these same. It's a school of thoughts and challenge in my face because animals raised for food sometimes are exempted from. That's what the United States does. When raised for food, they kind of exempt them from the provisions of the Animal Welfare Act. But Lagos State government didn't give us any exemption. So maybe this is what Animal Welfare Nigeria can do first by going to meat markets or pets. But I don't think the focus is only on wild animals. I think it can be any animals apart from the ones expressly exempted, like the animals in research facilities.
Okay, because of time, we are, running out of time. We've even exceeded our time. Sorry for that. Just give me the permission to give a bit summary about what we have learned today. So thank you everybody for your time, for your contribution. I love it. Today was very engaging because we all wanted to learn about the animal laws, especially in Nigeria. So somebody made mention of the fact that what can we do in terms of awareness? Of course, we have this, and I will still reach out to Mo. Maybe we can have a further interview, that can go viral. Somehow we'll try to make it go and let people realize this. But for those of you that are here, I believe you all have your social media platform. You can start from there. Talk about what you learned today at the webinar. Let's publicize it. One or two things that you have picked from today's meeting, let's make a post and share it. Don't wait for the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. We will do our own part, but it will be good if we have you also contribute and share this further to reach to different audience and on different platforms. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. To be sincere, I'm so excited about this. At least we know we have something. Then let's see how we can move it forward. Thank you, Mo, for your time. And
Thank you very much.
just one question. For your PhD program that you are doing at Birmingham City, is it something related to animal laws in Nigeria or completely different, or you're trying to compare? Or
Well, my research isn't about domestic, like state law. I'm looking at the African Union as a regional body, their own response to animal protection. So I don't do that for the PhD. The research questions don't involve state responses to animal protection, but the AU response, because there's something called an ALSA, the Animal Welfare Strategy for Africa, and that is really the focus of the PhD.
Okay, thank you so much. So in the absence of no question, I want to appreciate our speaker and also all the participants. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining, and thanks for making it an engaging event. And I hope you have learned one thing today, and we are the change. So what we have learned today, let's go and share the news to other people. And that is one of the mission of Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. If you are here to follow us, we are on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel. It's Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. We're on Facebook, Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. And on Twitter, which is now the X, we at AWGN 1414. And also on LinkedIn, we are on LinkedIn Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. Yes, kindly follow us, support what we are doing. Let's spread the word. Let's increase awareness. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and enjoy your day wherever you are. Have a wonderful day. Yeah. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody. Have a good day.
Welcome.